Red Clay Territory, Texas, 1874. The shotgun wedding wasn't her idea. The pistol at her father's hip made sure she said I'd do. Dust clung to the sweat on Clara Weston's skin as she stood beneath the warped rafters of the old chapel. The air was thick with the scent of rotting wood and desperation. Her white dress, once her mother's, hung loose on her slight frame, stained and yellowed by years in a trunk. A single strand of hair escaped her braid, clinging to her cheek in the heat. Her lips trembled, but she made no sound. Not here. Not in front of Duke Lanton. The outlaw's boots thudded on the creaking floorboards as he approached. He didn't bother dressing for the occasion, black coat stained with dust, revolver strapped low across his thigh, and a cruel smirk carved into his weathered face. His eyes, gray like a storm sky, flicked over Clara like he was sizing up a horse before purchase. Behind her, Jed Weston stood proud, chin up, one hand on his belt buckle, the other resting near his holstered Colt. His voice was low, clipped. "Say the words, girl." Clara's voice barely carried past her lips. "I do." Duke grinned and spit tobacco juice onto the floor. There were no guests. No preacher, either. Just a drunk town clerk with ink-stained fingers and a trembling hand, scribbling their names onto a scrap of paper that would pass for a marriage certificate. Outside, the prairie wind howled through broken windows. Clara stepped down from the chapel with her new husband beside her, but she didn't feel the ground. She felt empty, like her bones had turned to ash. That night, the sky was lit with lightning over the far hills, but no rain came. The air stayed dry, mean, like it was watching her suffer. The Lanton place was little more than a shack with a rotting porch and a bed that smelled of gunpowder and sweat. Clara stood at the door as Duke poured himself a drink and kicked off his boots. He didn't say a word to her, just downed the whiskey and turned. She tried to speak. "I'd like to wash before." The slap cracked across her face, knocking her into the wall. The pain didn't register right away, only the sound, ringing in her ears. Then the fire came. Her cheek burned. Her knees gave out. "Don't talk when I'm drinking," Duke growled. She crawled into the corner and curled there until the candlelight burned out. Her lip throbbed. Blood dried against her skin. Somewhere outside, a coyote howled. Inside, the only sound was her breathing, shallow, ragged, full of shame. Morning came without mercy. Sunlight poured in through the cracked roof, catching the dust in golden strands. Clara moved quietly, her hands shaking as she swept the floor and boiled water for coffee. She did everything just as Duke liked, silent, fast, invisible. Her lip was swollen, her eye darkening, but she didn't complain. She didn't dare. Later, Jed arrived with a bottle of moonshine and a cruel smile. "You'll keep him happy, Clara. Men like Duke can do things I can't. Keep this land safe. Keep you fed." She stared at him, too hollow to cry. "You sold me." Jed's jaw tightened. "I saved you." Clara walked out onto the porch before she did something foolish. The land stretched out in all directions, cracked earth, red hills, dry riverbeds. Nothing moved but the wind. It moaned through the fence posts like ghosts of the people who used to live here. That night, as she stripped the bed and shook out the blanket, something fell to the floor. A feather. But not just any feather, long, with deep red and black markings, painted with symbols she didn't recognize. It smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. She froze, heart pounding. It hadn't been there before. She hid it beneath her mattress and lay awake, watching the shadows crawl across the walls. The next few days passed like slow death. Duke drank. Jed laughed. Clara kept her head down and her bruises hidden. She cooked, cleaned, listened to the stories the men told about raids, burnings, and the gold mine they were carving into sacred Comanche ground. They spoke with pride about bones they'd unearthed, relics they'd melted down. Jed boasted about the time he put down a redskin chief with one clean shot. Duke laughed and said, "Hell, I took his woman's necklace for luck. Keeps me from getting scalped." Clara's stomach turned. Her hands trembled as she stirred stew. She didn't know why, but something inside her knew they'd crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. On the 5th day, Duke saddled his horse at dawn. The sky was painted in fire and smoke. He looked down at her as she stood on the porch, arms folded tight against the morning chill. "I'm taking the boys into Red Rock," he muttered. "Gonna teach some settlers not to sniff around our claim." She nodded. Before he mounted, he leaned in close, voice like gravel. "You're mine now, girl. Ain't no Comanche warrior or ghost gonna save you." He rode off with 5 others, all armed to the teeth. Dust rose in their wake. Clara stood there long after they vanished into the hills. The wind was shifting, cooler now, sharper. Then she saw him. Far off, on the edge of the red bluffs, a rider sat still upon his horse. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. He was tall, even from a distance. His silhouette cut clean against the morning light. His horse was dark, mane rippling like smoke. The man's head was bare. Long black hair moved with the wind. A lance or spear was strapped across his back, and something glinted on his chest. Clara stepped down from the porch, heart in her throat. The rider turned, slowly, then disappeared behind a rise. She stood rooted to the spot, unable to breathe. He had seen her, and he was not a ghost. The stars blurred as Clara ran. The desert wind clawed at her dress, dry branches tearing at her arms as she fled through the canyon's throat. Moonlight spilled in ragged shafts across the rocks, sharp and silver. Behind her, Duke's drunken voice still echoed in her ears, slurred threats, fists crashing into the table. The way his belt came loose with rage instead of desire. She had waited until he passed out. Then she took nothing but her boots and a sliver of bread. Now her ankle burned, swollen from a bad step, but she didn't stop. Not yet. The canyons narrowed, pressing in like jaws. Every shadow became a threat. Every gust of wind felt like fingers on her back. Then she heard it. Hooves. Not many. Just one. Close. She turned to climb the rocks, but her ankle gave. She crashed into the shale, breath gone, blood warmed down her arm. Before she could move, a shape blocked the moonlight. A man stepped forward from the darkness, thick-set and grinning. Duke's brother, Clay. "Hell, girl," he spat, pulling a rope from his saddle. "You thought you could just disappear." She tried to crawl, fingers digging into the grit. He kicked her in the ribs. "I ain't my brother," he sneered. "I don't care none of you scream." He reached down. A shriek of air. Then a thunk. Clay jerked upright, eyes wide. A tomahawk jutted from his neck. He collapsed without a word. Clara stared, too shocked to move. Footsteps crunched softly behind her. A man emerged from the stone, tall, sinewy, bare-chested beneath a deerskin vest. His skin was bronzed, muscles etched by sun and survival. Black war paint slashed across his face and chest, marking him like thunderclouds through the sky. His eyes, dark as obsidian, met hers without flinching. He knelt beside her. Said nothing. She tried to speak. "Who are you?" He tilted his head. No response. She winced, trying to sit. Her ankle throbbed. The man reached forward, slow, deliberate, and touched the swollen skin with his fingers. Then, without permission, he tore a strip from his own vest and wrapped her ankle, binding it tight and clean. She flinched. He held her gaze. Not cruel. Not kind. Just watching. "Thank you," she whispered. He stood and offered a hand. Clara hesitated, then took it. The journey was slow. He walked ahead, letting her lean against his shoulder when the ground grew sharp. They passed dry riverbeds, jagged rock formations, thorn brush. At sunrise, he stopped near a canyon hollow where water trickled through stone. A fire already burned there. As if he knew she'd come. He crouched by the flame and began grinding herbs into a paste. Clara sat opposite, eyes wide, trying to understand this ghost of a man. She remembered a figure on the red bluffs. It had been him. Watching. Waiting. He finally spoke, voice low, gravel-laced. "Tahi." She repeated, "Tahi." He nodded once. Then, after a long silence, "You." "Clara." She blinked. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer. He dipped cloth into the herbs and pressed it to her ankle. She hissed, biting her lip. His touch was firm, precise. Not cruel. The wind shifted, bringing scents of smoke and cedar. That night, beside the fire, she stared into the dancing flame and finally asked, "Why'd you save me?" Tai stared at the stars. After a while, he said, "Your father, Jed Weston." Clara stiffened. "You knew him." His jaw tightened. "He killed a chief," Tai said, each word like stone. "My father." Clara's stomach dropped. Tai's voice remained calm, but the fire in his eyes rose. "They came for gold. Dug into our land. Shot the ones who spoke against them. Jed took the heart of the land. Buried it under lies. And you, where his name? She looked down, shame crawling over her like ants. I didn't know, she whispered. He never told me. Ty's gaze softened slightly. You wear his blood, girl. But your eyes, they're not his. A long silence passed between them. Clara reached for the pouch around her neck, her mother's, worn since childhood. Inside was a bead, smooth and blue, carved with a bird's wing. Her mother had always said it was from a far people. She handed it to Tahi. He took it slowly, held it to the firelight. His breath caught. This is Comanche. Clara's eyes widened. Tahi nodded. Your mother. Clara's voice broke. He never spoke of her, only said she died giving birth. Tahi held the bead as if it were a tear turned to stone. Your mother was of my people. She vanished during the white raids. We never found her. Emotion welled in Clara's throat. Then I'm part of what he destroyed. Tahi looked at her, truly looked. You are not him. The fire popped. Embers drifted into the night. After a time, Tahi spoke again. I was to die. Clara blinked. What? Years ago, he said. I spared a settler's child during a raid. My brothers saw. They marked me a traitor. I was cast out. He paused, his eyes distant. That child had a scar, he said softly. On her hand. From a branding iron. Clara raised her hand slowly. A faded crescent marked her palm. You, he breathed. She could barely speak. You saved me, once before. Tahi gave a slow nod. Twice now. Tears streaked her dusty cheeks. Why? He stared into the fire. Because no one else would. They sat together in silence, two pieces of broken history stitched by fate. By dawn, they saddled Tahi's horse. He helped her mount, then swung up behind. Together, they rode the path back through the canyons. When the western ranch came into view, Clara gasped. Smoke rose in thick black columns. The barn was caved in. The house collapsed into scorched timber. They dismounted. Tahi drew his knife. Clara ran forward, her heart a hammer in her chest. Her father's body hung from the old oak, eyes glassed, mouth open, boots swinging gently in the breeze. A sign was nailed to his chest, the words etched in red. Gold for blood. Blood for gold. Clara stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. Behind the barn, they found the message carved into the wall, deep and jagged. We know the Indian took her. The wind howled across the plains. Tahi stood beside her, silent, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. They were no longer just fugitives. They were targets. The desert wind no longer made Clara flinch. She rode with her back straight, eyes sharp beneath the brim of a borrowed hat, Duke's old revolver strapped tight at her hip. Beside her, Tahi rode in silence, a living shadow against the scorched earth, his paint renewed, his eyes steady. The western ranch lay behind them in ashes and bone. Vulture's Hollow lay ahead, a gold camp turned graveyard in waiting. Their horses kicked up trails of red dust as they crossed ravines and dry creek beds. Days blurred together, each one feeding the fire that now lived in Clara's chest. At night, Tahi would build a fire low, teach her how to breathe with the land. He said little, but when he looked at her now, there was something different, not pity, not even sorrow, only respect. By the fourth day, they reached a crooked town without a name. Shacks leaned against each other like drunks. Children watched from porches with knives in their belts and dead eyes in their faces. A man coughed blood into the dirt while a woman counted coins beside a coffin. Clara dismounted and walked into the saloon like she'd been born in it. Men looked up, startled by the gun on her hip, more so by the fury in her gaze. A gambler with a twisted mustache sat in the corner, shuffling cards no one else played with. She walked up and slammed her palm on the table. Where's Duke Lanton? He smiled with yellow teeth. Well now, depends who's a skin dot. She drew the revolver and cocked it. He froze. Try again, she said, voice flat. He swallowed. Vulture's Hollow. South Pass. 20 men, maybe more. Gold in the hills. Guns in every tent. Clara leaned closer. If he hears I was a skin, I'll be back for your teeth. Outside, Tahi waited. He nodded once when she told him. The time had come. They rode through the night. By moonrise the next evening, they reached the high cliffs above the hollow. Dozens of tents sprawled below like boils on the land. Smoke curled from fires, laughter echoed through the rocks. The sound of pickaxes rang out, dull, endless. Ty dismounted and walked to the edge. He let out a low whistle, like a hawk's cry. At first, there was nothing. Then shapes emerged from the shadows. One by one, they came, silent, painted warriors riding lean horses, their eyes reflecting the moon. They greeted Ty not with words, but nods and ancient hand signs. He was one of them again, debts paid in blood. Clara stood among them, a lone woman, her hair braided in mourning, her eyes brighter than the stars. She held her mother's blue bead in one hand. Her other hand rested on the revolver. Ty pointed to the east. We ride at dawn. The warriors faded back into the dark, circling the camp like ghosts. When the first light touched the hills, Clara mounted. Her heart beat steady. This time, she was not running. This time, she was not a daughter or a wife. She was justice. They descended like thunder. Guns roared. Horses screamed. Men fell before they could rise. Clara rode straight through the chaos, Ty at her side. The Comanche riders cut through the tents like blades through canvas, fire licking at their heels. Duke's men scrambled for cover, but the shadows were already upon them. Clara dismounted at the mouth of the gold cave. She stepped inside alone. The heat hit her first, and then the stench. Sweat, dynamite, rotting greed. Torches lined the stone walls, and there, standing beneath a beam of light, was Duke. He hadn't aged a day. The same sneer. The same eyes. Only now, he held a torch in one hand and a stick of dynamite in the other. Around him, crates of gold, fuses running like veins. Didn't think you had it in you, girl, he said. But look at you now, dressed like a savage, talking like a hero. She raised the gun. He chuckled. You gonna shoot me, Clara? After all we shared. You don't get to speak her name, she whispered. Not with that mouth. His smile faltered. Ty stepped inside behind her. Duke's eyes narrowed. Figures. You brought your pet. One of the Comanche warriors entered a moment later, but something was wrong. His eyes were cold. Too cold. Without warning, he lunged at Tahi, knife drawn. They crashed against the cave wall, stone ringing with steel. Clara screamed, but Tahi was faster. He drove his tomahawk into the traitor's chest, but not before the blade found his side. Tahi staggered. Clara fired once, straight through the traitor's skull. The mun dropped like a sack. Duke laughed, torch still raised. You see, ain't no honor in war. Just blood and betrayal. Clara ran to Tahi, catching him as he dropped to one knee. Blood poured between his fingers. No, she whispered. No, not like this. He reached into his belt and pulled free the tomahawk, placing it in her hand. His voice was thin. End it. She stood, trembling, tomahawk heavy in her grip. Duke backed away slowly. Now, Clara, you ain't no killer. The cave pulsed with silence. Then Clara stepped forward, slowly, with purpose. Duke raised the torch higher. I'll blow it all sky high before I let you take it. But Clara didn't aim for the dynamite. She lunged. The tomahawk sang through the air and buried itself at his chest. He dropped the torch. It rolled into the crates. Sparks danced. Clara turned and ran, dragging Tahi with what strength she had. The explosion came like thunder cracking the sky. Gold melted into flame. Rock caved in. Fire swallowed the cave's greed and sins in one searing breath. Outside, the warriors gathered. Tahi lived, though barely. Clara cradled him as the morning wind swept through the burning camp. Tears ran down her cheeks. Not from fear. Not from pain. But because the wind smelled of cedar and wildflowers. Of smoke and something sacred. She felt her mother in that wind. Later, with the sun at their backs, Clara and Tahi rode from Vulture's Hollow. Behind them, fire still danced in the cave, but they did not look back. Clara whispered the words to the land, the wind, the ghosts. My father gave me to a killer, but a warrior gave me back my soul.